Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Miriam Stein. I'm I work for SPA, and I'd like to, before we begin, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today throughout Australia. And where I'm on, it's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders, past and present. And I'd also like to welcome any First Nations people here today on our Zoom. And it's for this pitch on demand, I'd like to introduce Alison Herbert Burns from BINGE. And just a little bit of a background on Ali. Ali joined BINGE in 2020 as Executive Director, coming across from the Foxtel Group, where she had responsibility for Foxtel's portfolio of movie and entertainment content deal. Ali's responsible for the day-to-day operation and commercial elements, including driving the programming, marketing, and consumer acquisition strategies to grow BINGE, which is now Australia's fastest growing entertainment streaming service. As a specialist content executive, Ali has a track record in transforming business content strategies to build new audiences and drive growth. Welcome, Ali.
Hello, Miriam. Good morning. I'm coming from the land of the Camaragal people here in Sydney's North Shore, but lovely to be with you all this morning.
So, Ali, can you tell me or tell all the people here today about your role at BINGE and your vision for BINGE as Australia's fastest growing entertainment streaming service?
Absolutely. So BINGE launched in May 2020. So we're just over 2 years old, coming up 2.5 years old. And when we arrived in the market, there were already lots of other SVOD services and entertainment options out there, and there's been more services launched since. So for us, we're here to bring Australians what we think is the very, very best of world content. We go out to the world and buy from America, from the UK, from so many partners that we have fed through our broader Foxtel Group ownership, just some of the best television in the world. And that is our mission. Our mission is to save you time and make sure that when you give your time and you sit back on the couch, that you've got the very, very best to choose from. And in addition to that, when we don't buy it, what do we want to make that can complement and sit amongst that offering? I feel that it's a privilege to be in people's lounge rooms. I think it's a very intimate space to be. You're either on your own and watching something or as a family. And we really want to make sure we've got some of the best television and movie options for you and become a kind of a firm favorite in the household, which is what we're also been seeing since our launch. We are part of the broader Foxtel Group. And like I said, we've been out in the market now for about 2.5 years and growing quickly.
Yeah, some of my favourite shows at the moment. So The 12 and Love Me, absolute favourites.
Love Me on behind me. I don't know if you can see that. I'm literally in my office. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the BINGE audience and how does that really differ from a Foxtel audience?
Yeah, so I think the main thing from streaming, and most of you guys will know this, no doubt, is streaming's big business and it's big, broad business. So back in the day, it was kind of seen as more niche, free to air was the major driver, subscription television and SVOD was the emerging place. But we're now in a situation where 75% of all Australian households, do you think there's 10 million households out there? Over 7.5 million of them are paying for content via a subscription service. And that means that those households are very representative of the Australian demographics and demography. So you're talking to predominantly millennials and Gen Xers, people aged between kind of 30 to 55. It's increasingly their predominant source of entertainment, increasingly over free to air. So for us, we're looking in our early years as we're growing for big, broad, populist content that can get the country talking and really is driving a reason to subscribe. Something that you're willing to part with your hard-earned money for your entertainment services, which is, big difference between obviously free to air and online video and subscription television. So, you know, has to catch someone's attention, has to really, you know, drive a considered retail style purchase decision, as well as being broadly very entertaining. So that's for bringing new customers in. And then for the existing customers we've got, something that can entertain them and engage them so that they stay, you know, stay subscribed and enjoying the platform.
Fantastic. Can you talk a little bit more about the team and, you know, how you work, say with Brian, with Lana, with Marshall? What's that relationship and what does that look like in bringing a project to Binge?
Absolutely. So the way we look at it, the Foxtel Group, you know, we're kind of owned by Telstra and News Corp, and the Foxtel Group has two big retail brands in the entertainment space. We have traditional Foxtel for cable and satellite subscribers, and then we have our streaming products with Binge. We also have KO for sport. But if you think about the entertainment retail brands, Foxtel and Binge, we have separate teams that run those retail brands from a programming and a marketing perspective. So Binge, I have a gentleman by the name of John Boehm, who's our director of content. He works with me and his team to program what you see on Binge, how it's presented, how we schedule it. And then there's a similar team at Foxtel. At Foxtel, Marshall Hill recently joined Foxtel from SBS, where he was for many, many years. And Marsh is kind of my equivalent at Foxtel. So we're sitting there saying, what do we need to run, you know, our businesses? What are we acquiring and what are we producing ourselves? So Marshall and I will really come together, and I might say, I really would love, John and I really think we need something like this for Binge. He'll have similar needs at Foxtel. And then together we work with Brian Walsh, our executive director of production for drama, and say, I need this. And Marsh might say, I need this. A lot of the time they overlap. And then Brian, supported by Lana, you know, really go to market and say, we're looking for these kind of projects, or equally take pitches, inbound pitches. And they're always sitting there in those pitches, knowing very clearly what Binge is looking for, what Foxtel's looking for. So they're kind of collaborating and bringing those two wish lists and need states together. When you bring something to Foxtel, you can come in through Brian and Lana, which is where a lot of our pitches come through. You can assume that once they've assessed them, they do come through to Marshall and I, and we'll often then get involved, and you'll find yourself sometimes meeting us to talk through your project. Equally, sometimes people come to Marshall or I directly. We very quickly bring Lana and Brian in. We're a small, agile team, but you know, we all need to stay very connected and plugged in to each other. So there's a few doors on the way in, but I think one of the things I love sharing with people is because of our growth in recent years, the Foxtel Group now has over 4.5 million subscribers, people paying regularly for access and content. And with our entertainment clients, you really are, between Binge and Foxtel, you're now reaching pretty much the second largest audience for streaming in the country behind Netflix. And the projects that we commission in the scripted space do go on both platforms. So you are, you know, reaching a really big group of people when you, have something commissioned and made by the group.
What is Binge's strategy, and what are some of the factors that are driving your decisions when commissioning local originals? Like, what's the thinking?
Yeah. Well, because we have some wonderful sources of supply, like I said, from around the world. We've got, you know, 20 years of relationships with the BBC and All Three Media and, you know, the studios and Warners and NBCs of the world. When we commission something, it's really, it's kind of brand defining, and it's really about punctuating our offering with some wonderful Australian content, and it's stuff that we then really get behind. So we do look for marquee, high value, premium television, and we have an audience that are used to watching some of the best programming in the world. So with something like Love Me, I remember when we were pitching and sitting in the room with the producers and the team, we're like, this is going to sit on a carousel on a channel amongst Mare of Easttown and Succession, and we have an audience who have a sophisticated and palette, but they also have high expectations on their drama. So we are ambitious in terms of what we can achieve in our Australian storytelling, and we are quite considered in what we are therefore looking for. If I'm getting a lot of murder shows or true crime thrillers, which come through a lot of that studio supply, what can we add to the mix that we can't buy that really speaks to an Australian audience or will stand out in that slate? So we're not looking to kind of just replicate things that we're getting, that we can buy in. We really want to make things that stand out and add to the rest of the slate. So there's an example coming up soon. We haven't released it yet, but we've got a comedy called Colin from Accounts. And I just really wanted something lighthearted and refreshing after such a hard couple of years. Kind of looked at the slate and what was coming with it. Let's make it. You know, we really wanted to make something funny. With Love Me, I just felt like we needed a really strong Australian contemporary love story. You know, we looked at things like Love My Way and Secret Life of Us and, you know, Offspring. We're like, we're ready for something. We wanted to do something big and hearty and sincere like that we thought could cut through. So yeah, it's quite considered. We look at everything else that's coming and how those original commissions can really elevate the slate.
Terrific. So moving on now to our specific brief for this particular initiative. So we've got Pitch on Demand was created to give streamers an opportunity to consider gaps in their slate and provide a very specific brief for Australian producers. So what is this brief?
Oh my gosh, there's probably 500 I could give you, but the one I wanted to hone in on is one of the things I love about streaming, and there's nothing, I'm not speaking against when you go off on your own and you love a show, but what I love is a collective experience. So I'm really looking for a gripping drama, could be a dramedy, you know, something at least 40 minutes episode lengths one would expect, but in the vein of those great British kind of mini series, you know, limited series, 4-6 episodes max, something that can come in as a compelling, you know, like a double movie in terms of the impact of the story. You've got, you know, 4 or so hours to tell it, but something that's really good for co-viewing for male and female audiences. So what we know is that, you know, crime series really drive female viewing. I'm looking for something that's got a little bit more action and thriller. So it can still be set amongst a crime. You know, we do get a lot of death and murder through some of the things that we acquire. So don't limit it to having to be a crime around a death or something. Like it can be a thriller, a corporate crime, a white collar crime. You know, there's some action, jeopardy that's driving the story. But in the vein of some of those wonderfully great British series that you see that are sometimes, you know, 3, 4, 5 episodes, that they schedule them quite interestingly on free to air. In the UK, they often have like a binge, but over the week. So you'll have like 3 nights in a row on free to air television over there where you'll have 1 or 2 episodes. So you're kind of getting through the story in a short period of time, or you could stretch it out over 2 or 3 weeks. But the idea is, you know, you come in and you get a really satisfying story over kind of 4 or 5 episodes. Think The Bodyguard out of the UK. Think Vigil, although probably don't have submarine budgets, but, you know, something like that where you come away and you go, gosh, that was a really gripping story, and you can really watch it together, and it would be, yeah, driving co-viewing for male and female audiences.
So if it was something like an exotic, erotic thriller, supernatural thriller, mystery thriller, like it's so many different ways you can go with that. Is there something that's out, like not interested in that? Or...
Yeah, probably less interested in paranormal,
yep.
And kind of supernatural fantasy. You know, I mean, we're a platform that has something like Game of Thrones and dragons, and, you know, we're not expecting that level of CGI or fantasy.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not adverse to something that's got a supernatural thread to it. If a good example might be, I think it was called The Outsiders, a Ben Mendelsohn HBO drama, which was effectively a true detective kind of whodunit, but it had a slight supernatural element to it. That
more grounded.
Yeah, I kind of want it to be more reality and more set in the real world, not so much fantasy. We're not frightened of love and big emotions and relationships. I think, you know, we really lent into that in Love Me, but yeah, probably more mainstream than erotic and fantasy.
Yeah. What about scale? Like in terms of budgets, and you're thinking about, you know, I'm coming to pitch this show. What are we looking at in terms of scale and budget range? Is there opportunities for co-commissioning, co-productions, in terms of how you're thinking about, you know, this pitch now to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Miriam, isn't it? Because it's such a jigsaw puzzle. Because even when you get an Australian commission, depending on the platform that you're working with, you still have a dance to do around the world. So for Foxtel Group, yeah, we are only interested in Australian rights. We take out Australian rights, but we're used to working with other with other platforms. So on Column from Accounts, our international distributor is CBS, who are then selling it around the world. So we're working really closely with what they need and, developing parts of the story together. Love Me was sold to America. It went out on Hulu and it's gone kind of out around the world. So we are often in a jigsaw puzzle of consideration. So we find generally Australian audiences, because they're used to seeing content from England and America, there's a certain level of quality that's expected. So we are looking for, that kind of premium television. In what we're looking for. I think and the expectation is that, we'll work with partners, production partners and distributors to bring in money from other parts in the world so that we can get the budget right to make something.
So it brings us to the question, what stage does the project need to be at in order to submit to this pitch on demand? What's the minimum you'd want someone to have before they submit their one page and possibly come in to do a meeting with you?
We will do development with someone to get it to a point where we could make a decision. I'd like you to be coming in with a very fleshed out idea of where the story goes. Ideally a Bible. If you have a first step, great. Often if we love something, we're like, can we read, the first episode or a pilot script? If you don't have the pilot done or an episode yet, that's okay, as long as the story and the reason for being is very clear. I like to see a very authored, creative vision put forward to us for us to consider, when we're accepting pitches. So don't have to have an episode, but it really, and come in and have done the thinking on who you think this is for. When we were making Love Me, we were very clear. We're sitting in the writer's room. We're like, this is the person that's going to watch this. So she's going to be this age. This is, how she's going to binge it. Hopefully, it's very clear. This is how we're going to market it. This is who we're going to market it to. So I love hearing that from creators when they have not only a brilliant idea, but an understanding of who it's for. That goes a long way when you come in and talk to us, because that's the first thing Marshall and I are thinking straight away. Where does this sit? Who's it for? Who's going to watch it? Are they watching it alone? Are they watching it together? Why would they want to watch this? Which is why we need to really see the creative vision of where the story goes.
So I guess there is an expectation that really becomes clear to you on that one page that people submit, but also then when they come in to meet you within that one-on-one pitch, that they have clarity around that stuff. So clarity around audience and clarity around story.
Or that, that's what we very quickly work out. If there's a kernel of idea that we love here, and we'll be like, could it be more like this? Could it be more? That's kind of where we get involved. I think the other thing for Foxtel is, and Brian's approach, mine and Marsh as well, is we work really closely with our partners on this stuff, because there's so much at stake for us about why we're choosing to make something, and that we will then heavily market it. We really lean in, and from a volume perspective, we don't have 100 things on the slate all the time. We've got a small team here, and we are actively involved. We're giving notes, and especially in the early days of getting those scripts right, especially, you can expect heavy access to people like Brian and Lana, and we're really working closely with producers on getting these things scoped and envisaged right from the very beginning.
How much does it need to be packaged? Do you want to know who the team of writers potentially will be, who the director potentially could be, potential actors, some attachments, ideas of those things? What would you like to see too?
Not a must-have. I think the thing we really look at the beginning is the writing team. Writers are in hot demand. It really does flow from that script. So much of the setup and the success and what ultimately can roll out in the show is really from the strength of what's in that page. We like to have time to get our scripts right. Having an understanding of who's attached or who would like to write or who's available is important. Directors and stars and things and actors can come in later for us. I think it's really the story, is it compelling, and who's in that writing team initially. And then often we bring other people in as well. Kind of collectively, we might be like, let's reach out to this person or whatever. But I think story and writing, big part of it.
Yeah. I might go to some of the questions that have been coming through. psychological thriller, aka the next clickbait. Is that something that
Yeah, that's a good example. I think that's a really good example. Yeah.
yeah, great. And then also with that is, are you creating binge originals filmed in Australia or filmed elsewhere in the world? So if it was essentially an Australian story but set somewhere else, does that work for you guys, or are we completely, and that comes back to that question of what does Australian look like for a binge show like this?
Yeah, I might explain with how the approach for Love Me. So I wanted a really contemporary Australia to come across on screen. It wasn't a typical beaches and, you know, big city, you know, here's the city with the opera house in the background. Like, we wanted Melbourne to be a character, but it could have been Copenhagen or Paris, you know, running across that bridge. We wanted to show a really modern, contemporary version of Australian life. Not the kind of big rural country landscapes that you sometimes see. So I suppose my point is, I often say to people, it doesn't have to be achingly Australian, but the Australian sensibility and reason. Otherwise, we could have just gone and bought something from England, or America. So it's like, we did a lot of work on Love Me to get the humour and the Australian tone there. If it's a great protagonist, if the story is driven from Australian point of view, but it goes to other places, or it goes to London, or it goes to another town, totally fine. It doesn't have to be 100% Australian, but we obviously love supporting Australian stories, dramas, creatives, you know, and local talent. So as much that can come out of Australia, the better. But yeah, if a story goes overseas, or it's a collaboration with an international partner, that can work for us. But we do want to see an Australianness to it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking to the other side of my screen because I'm going through these Q&A because they're rolling in fast. Okay, are you looking for anything outside the scripted drama, factual scripted animation, for example? I think let's just focus maybe for this conversation. I think let's just stick to the brief that there is. But I mean, you can speak to maybe what are the other things outside of this brief that you...
Yeah, sure. I mean, we are doing things outside of scripted. So I would also love a 4 or 6 part comedy. But, you know, for the brief, we really did try to stick with the thriller idea. But we've got our first comedy special coming, a stand-up comedy special coming on Binge soon with Jimmy Reese. We're about to announce a lifestyle kind of property show. So we are doing things outside of scripted. Yeah, but at the moment, I would just love some more scripted.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of questions around, does it have to be set in Australia? So you've answered that.
There's a question here about...
Yeah, what's the approximate license fee for Australian rights? We need a guide, please. There's a question here.
Yeah, so you've obviously got the, you know, kind of the amount that we can come in for from a Screen Australia perspective. Yeah. But I would just say it's kind of project dependent. There was a while where we were kind of at the Australian license fee level, but it's a little bit case by case. Yeah. But we're normally seeing, you know, plus $1 million production budgets per episode. So hope that guidance helps.
Yeah. Would you consider period drama that follows, that ticks the boxes in terms of your brief?
I'd look at it. It's funny with period because one of the things I'm loving at the moment is almost like the recent period. It's like, what is period? Are we going way back to Elizabethan times? Or are we looking at that kind, you know, something like Everything I Know About Love, which was set kind of 10 years ago in London, which I love that show. But, you know, what else? You know, I'm loving the nostalgia. It seems that the 80s and 90s seem to be creeping in, but some people are defining that as period. So yeah, it's not a period. There might have been a stage where we're like, we're not interested in period, but if it's the right story, I'd definitely look at it. Yeah.
Oh, this question was specifically, sorry, because I didn't finish reading it. It was set in the 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let's have a look. I mean, our audience is broad. So, you know, again, we'd want to understand, you know, what's driving the narrative and what's there, but no, definitely have a look at that.
Absolutely. What are some final words of wisdom to give producers as they are submitting this page to you and preparing to potentially be chosen to come in for a pitch with you? How does that get assessed, you know, in terms of what's your process, and then what should they be bringing in terms of some advice in coming to do that one-to-one pitch?
Great question. I suppose the first thing is the story, this kind of very strong authored sense of what is this story about? Why does it need to be made? And a real clarity on your vision for it. I love hearing somebody fight and defend their, not defend, but, really fight for helping us understand the story. And I think about the pictures that we have, and they're often, producers will come and bring them in, but it's often a writer or a kind of showrunner. We're hearing that term more and more, really talk to the protagonist's journey and, what we're going to get out of this, what they'll often say to me, this is how the audience will feel at the end of the last episode. This is what they'll feel at the end of the first episode. So it goes back to my point a little bit before about having really, clarity about who this is for. So I love hearing the story and a really strong vision from the creatives, but then where it fits into the landscape. If you're bringing a island set comedy, I might say, well, I've got the resort on Stan and I've got White Lotus on Binge, and I think we're fine in that space. So just be really aware of the landscape, and obviously you never know what's coming around the corner, but just think about where this fits in the what's out there already, because customers, there's a lot of choice. We've never had more shows being made. So when you have a really great idea and that's matched with a sense of who it's for, that goes a really long way. Now, I said before, Marshall and I have ideas about where our gaps are and what we're kind of looking for, but sometimes an amazing idea comes in and knocks our socks off as well. So when a pitch is right or that clarity of that story's there, it can upend our plans. We go, we have to find a way to make this show. I didn't think I was looking for this, but maybe I am. So, yeah.
Oh, great. There was one more question that came in, and it does come up throughout the feed, is, are you looking for an established production company to be on board, or will you help facilitate a partner if you like the pitch?
Yeah, probably the latter. I mean, a lot of the pitches that do come to us, it's production companies that are already working with that creative, but obviously with Brian's network and the amount of writers and people that we're in contact with, we do sometimes have projects that we then connect with a producing partner. So don't feel that is an impediment to submitting a brief.
So thank you. I think we've come to the end of our time. We've got 1 minute, and I just want to say thank you so much. And for everyone, applications close on the 4th of October. Successful applicants will be notified by SPA on the 2nd of November. And then there'll be an opportunity to do a practice pitch with us at SPA before you go in and pitch 1-to-1, which will be sometime between the 14th and the 18th, where you'll be pitching directly to Binge, and to Ali and her team.
Oh, so exciting.
So much, Ali, and thank you to Binge and for this wonderful brief, and look forward to looking at all those one-page exciting ideas that come in.
Oh, Miriam, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having us on the program, and I'm just so thrilled to see people interested in what Binge is looking for, and I really am looking forward to reading your pictures. So thank you so much for joining us and hearing from Binge.
Yes, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining on the Zoom. Bye now.